morning once again, and welcome to today's class. I think we can start. We have about 16 students in the class at the moment, so the others will join as we continue. We have been looking at property, plant, and equipment this week, and yesterday we were looking at how you're going to change depreciation methods. We're looking at changes in accounting estimates. So we did an example yesterday, and we looked at how you'd account for depreciation, a change in estimates using the cumulative catch-up method, and we finished that example. And I left you with the activity to do the next example, which was to do the same example, use the same information, but you needed to use the reallocation method. So we will just complete that. I hope you've gone through the activity already. Let me share my screen and go to the question, and then we'll just review that before we actually start with today's work. We will be looking at land. All right, I'm sharing my screen. It's just loading. All right, so let's just go through the theory of the reallocation method. What happens? How would you account for a change in estimate using the reallocation method? The depreciation is calculated using the carrying amount at the beginning of the current year, and then the expected useful life and residual value at the beginning of the current year is also used. So yesterday, when we were dealing with the reallocation with the cumulative catch-up method, someone had given an answer of about 25,000, and I think that answer, you arrived at that answer by using the the reallocation method. So we're going to just look at the question. So example 2 says, using the same information as example 1, calculate the depreciation and the carrying amount for 20x2 by reallocating the carrying amount over the remaining useful life. Again, how do you know that you're supposed to use the reallocation method and not the cumulative catch-up method? The question tells you. In this instance, it specifically mentions calculate the depreciation and the carrying amount for 20x2 by reallocating the carrying amount over the remaining useful life. All right, so because you've seen the word by reallocating the carrying amount, you've seen those words, that means you should use the reallocation method. Is that clear? All right, so let us go back to the information. This is the information. An entity purchased a plant for 150,000 on 1st of January 20x1 and intended to depreciate it using the units of production method. The estimated residual value is nil, that is unchanged. Production in the year ended 31 December 20x1 was 10,000 units, and in 20x2 it was 15,000 units. It was originally expected that the asset would be able to produce 100,000 units in its lifetime. That was the original estimate of the total useful life. But in 20x2, this estimated total production was changed to 90,000. All right, calculate the depreciation and carrying amount for 20x2. But in this instance, we are going to use the reallocation method by reallocating the carrying amount over the remaining useful life. I already posted the solution on Teams. So I hope you've already reviewed the solution. Do you have any question? with regards to how we arrived at the solution. Let me share my screen. Okay, I believe you all see my screen, the Excel workbook. Let me hide the information that relates to the cumulative. I can just leave it as it is. Using both methods to calculate the carrying amount at the end of 31 December 20x1, we arrive at an amount of 135,000. So I'm not going to go through that because when we use the cumulative catch-up method, we arrived at the exact same answer. So what we're concerned with is 20x2. How do we arrive at depreciation for 20x2 and the carrying amount for 20x2? Okay. The carrying amount for 20x1 is 135,000. That is the cost price of 150,000 that we were provided with, minus the 15,000 depreciation for that year. So we arrived at an amount of 131,000. Now the remaining useful life at 31 December 20x1, what is that amount? So we said that the question told us that the total number of products that can be produced is 100,000 units. And we've already produced 10,000 units in 20x1. So 100,000 minus 20,000 units, minus 10,000 units gives us an amount of 90,000 remaining units that can be produced over the life of that asset. Are we together up to that point in time?
No, sir. Please repeat. No, sir.
All right. If we go back to the question tells us, I think you should have the question in front of you, but let me project it once again. Let me just share my entire window instead. Okay. Why isn't my document opening? Okay, it was just a bit slow. If we go to the question, the original question told us that it was originally expected that the asset would be able to produce 100,000 units. Are we okay up to that point in time?
Yes, sir.
And then we're told that production in the year ended 31 December 20x1 was 10,000 units. Okay. Production in the year ended 31 December was 10,000 units. So if in total the asset is expected to produce 100,000 units, and it has already produced 10,000 units by the end of 31 December 20x1, how many units can the asset produce over its remaining useful life? In order to determine that amount, you just say the 100,000 units, the total estimated production, minus what was produced in the year, 100,000 minus 10,000 units. That is how you arrive at an amount of 90,000 units. So the 90,000 units, those are the remaining units that it was originally, or that is expected to be produced over the remaining useful life. Okay? All right. Now, the question goes on to tell us, in 20X2, the estimated total production was changed to 90,000 units. The estimated total production was changed to 90,000 units. Now, this is important. And in bold, it has been highlighted, estimated total production. So originally, the estimated total production was 100,000 units. But in 20X2, they estimated that the estimated total production is now only going to be 90,000 units. So if we have the estimated total production is 90,000 units, and we've produced in 20X1, we produced 10,000 units. What would be the remaining production for what would be the remaining production? The remaining total production would be 80,000 units, right? In 20X2, from 20X2. Are we together there?
No, sir.
Okay, what don't you understand? Where are you stuck so that I can explain that part before we move on? I want to make sure you understand.
Sir, it's the units whereby you are saying hey, it's 90 units and then there again it's 80 units. I really don't get that part.
All right, do you understand where we arrive at the 90,000 units?
No.
This estimated total production, let me call it revised estimated total production. This is given in the question. It tells us in 20X2, this estimated total production was changed to 90,000 units. The part that is highlighted in green, can you see that? I'm waiting for your input. Okay. So the revised estimated total production in 20X2, that's 90,000 units. That is given in the question. All right. But then, if the revised estimated total production is 90,000 units, and we have already produced 10,000 units, 10,000 units were produced in 20X1, that highlighted in yellow. Production in the year ended 31 December 20X1 was 10,000 units. So what would be the remaining total production from 20X2 onwards? The remaining total production would then be the 90,000 units. That's the revised estimate that is given in the question, minus the number of units that were already produced, which was 10,000 units. So the remaining total production from 20x2 is actually 80,000 units. Are we together now? This is 80,000 units.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Sir.
Okay. So now that we know that we can produce 80,000 units, we have to calculate the depreciation for 20x2. And how will you calculate the depreciation for 20x2 using the reallocation method? You're just going to take the carrying amount, which is 135,000. That is the same as was calculated in using the cumulative catch-up method. That was just the cost minus the depreciation for 20x1. I'm not going to go through how we calculated depreciation for 20x1 because we did that yesterday. All right. So if you have a problem, just go back to the recording and watch how we arrived at the 15,000. So once you get the carrying amount, 135,000 units, 135,000, sorry, that's the cost or the carrying amount. That's in a dollar value. It's not a unit value. So $135,000, and you multiply it by 15,000 divided by 80,000. So what is that? 15,000 is the number of units that have been produced in the current year. Okay, so let me highlight this. Let me highlight it in, I'll put in red. So I'll read the whole sentence. Production in the year ended 31 December 20x1 was 10,000 units. And in 20x2, it was 15,000 units. So in 20x2, we produced 15,000 units. And if you want to calculate depreciation using the production units method, you would take the number of units produced in that year divided by the total expected number of units that you'd expect to produce and multiply that amount or that value times the carrying amount. Okay, let's go look at the formula. I'll just hide all of this. So the formula to calculate the depreciation, in this instance, it would be for 20x2. Instead of using the cost price, we're going to use the carrying amount. Okay, so you're going to use the carrying amount times the number of units produced in that year divided by the total expected production. So the carrying amount was 135,000. We multiply that now produced in the year, and we divide that by the total expected production in order to calculate the depreciation for 20x2. Okay, so this is it. The depreciation for 20x2. Let me just hide this. So the depreciation for 20x2, 135,000 times 15,000 divided by 80,000, we arrive at an amount of 25,313. Is that clear? Okay, I assume that is clear. So once you've calculated the
Sir?
depreciation for 20x2, the question, yes, go ahead.
Why didn't you use the 15,000 in 20 that was produced in 20x2?
We did use the 15,000. What are you talking about?
Oh, okay, see, I got it.
Okay. All right. So it's 15,000. That's the units produced in 20x2 divided by the total remaining production. The total remaining production is 80,000 units. And then you multiply that by the carrying amount, which is 135,000. You'll arrive at depreciation for 20x2 of 25,313. So the carrying amount for at 31 December 20x2, that is just the carrying amount at the beginning of the current year or at the beginning of 20x2, which is 135,000 minus depreciation for the current year, which is 25,313. Then we arrive at an amount of 109,687. That's the carrying amount at 31 December 20x2. So there's a slight difference between the carrying amounts using the cumulative catch-up method and the reallocation method. Okay, and so those are the two methods that you would use to account for a change in estimate. And in this instance, the change in estimate was with regards to the useful life, and useful life was given by taking the number of units that will be produced by the asset. All right. Are there any questions? No questions? So the solution is in Teams. You can go through that. All right, I won't save this. Now let us go and look at what I wanted to discuss today. What I wanted to discuss today